Hey everybody, it's Beth. Welcome to Infinite Garden. This week I am finally reviewing the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. I've had it for over a month and I have worn it every single day since I have gotten it. I will touch briefly on how the I Need a Nude palette compares to the recently released Mini Starlet. I think they are very similar. I think it's reasonable to ask if you need one or the other or both, so I'm here to share my thoughts on that as well. If all of that sounds good to you, please stay tuned. This is Chewy. She doesn't always love it when I film. Sometimes she stands there looking betrayed for a while. Chewy had a bath this morning and she's, a little annoyed with me, so we'll see how she does. Well, you're welcome to come in, baby. Okay, so anyway, I bought the I Need a Nude palette when it came out immediately in August. Like a lot of people, I was interested in the very, neutral, leaning cool color story. I could tell that this would play well with my skin tone. I tend to wear light, neutral foundation products, and this just seemed like a color story that would work for me. Around that same time, I also ordered the Mini Starlet palette that came out. I'm sure most of you already know this, but just to recap, this 15 pan palette is referred to as the midi format, and the 5 pan palette is a mini format. And in Natasha Denona's universe of eyeshadow palettes, she has, generally speaking, a mini that corresponds nicely with the midi, but they correspond with each other in a way that you could see the mini palettes almost serving as like an expansion pack or a booster pack. So I'll talk a little bit about this mini later. I wanted to film a video earlier, but a couple of things were working against me, and I also found it hard for me to formulate my thoughts, even after using this palette for a whole month. And, really getting into it. I understand this palette completely now. It's still hard for me to figure out exactly what to say about it, and I think that's kind of interesting. This palette contains 7 mattes and 8 shimmer/sparkle shades. Generally speaking, I think the shimmers occupy the neutral end of the spectrum, and the mattes can take you either into a cooler mauve territory or a warmer kind of peachy territory. I think a lot of people immediately read this palette as being cool. As a person with neutral skin that leans a little cool, I think this palette is neutral, and I do think the peachy shades do bring you into a decidedly warm side of the spectrum. I do think the mauves are indeed cool, but I wouldn't necessarily call this a strictly cool toned palette. I do think this palette is generally going to work best on people with light to medium skin tones. I can only speak for myself, but I can say that these tones are pretty light, and a lot of these mattes are decidedly pale. And I think if you have deeper skin, I think specifically Mesh and Stone are going to be somewhat hard to wear. On me, both of these tones read as quite purple on the eye. You end up getting one very light shade and one very deep shade. I find the light shade, it's a little slightly peachier than my skin tone, but it blends beautifully. I do think that Silhouette is a nice deep color if you want a daytime soft smoky eye effect. I do think it leans a little purple. Here it is next to Mesh and Stone, and I forgot which one is which, they're so similar. It can be a little patchy, but I do think it's a purpley brown. There's also a medium tone shade called Tender, and then 2 pinky peachy shades. Wit is on top here. This is a very orangey peachy shade, and Vague is a little bit in between peachy and the mauve tone. And then Tender is a tone kind of between Mesh and Stone and Silhouette, kind of fills in the gap there as mattes. I think these are useful mattes, but I will say that I think the shimmers overall are neutral, and when you add the mattes in, I think you direct the look overall from being neutral into either a cool territory or a warm territory, but they all play beautifully together. Let's talk about these shimmers. The shimmers are really interesting. I think this palette contains many super beautiful wearable shimmers, and I think a lot of these are one and done shades. The shades that I think that I could put on my eye without any other support, these 3 shades are Delilah, Ella, and travertine. You can see them here on my finger. They aren't super different. These shades are super useful. In fact, I use them almost every day. Delilah is my favorite. It has a little bit of a multicolored sparkle reflect. Ella is in the middle. It has a kind of taupey neutral base with a little bit of a goldy peachy reflect. Travertine in the pan looks cool and silver, but I find on my skin it has a peachy base that makes it very neutral. Filigree is similar. It is a more foiled, overtly taupe shade. It has a peachy base again, and then it has a taupey reflect. This shade is nice to add a little bit of drama or if you want a little bit of a smoky eye. The remaining 4 shades are light toned reflex. This is a creamy metallic whisper. This is the middle shade, the show-stopping Muse, super wet effect goldy silver. You have Sheen, which is a more subtle goldy reflect, and then Mia, a very silvery pink ballet slipper pink. Of all of the shades in the palette, it's the one I am least attracted to. I've made more use out of these 3 shades, Whisper, Muse, and Sheen. On me, each of these turns out to be quite peachy. It's kind of surprising. There's like a peachy base with a little bit of a silvery neutral reflect. These have been surprisingly warmish on me, and I think really bear a lot of the responsibility for making this a quote-unquote nude palette. So that's the palette. I think each of these shadows performs beautifully. The Natasha Denona formula is of a high standard, and I think that each of these shades meets that high standard, what we expect from Natasha Denona. I don't think there are any duds in here. I also think it's notable to say there aren't any of those cream to powder formulas. Some people love them, some people don't. I don't miss them in this palette. I don't long for a cream to powder formula here. I think focusing on these new shimmer formulas was a good call. I'm super into what she's offered here. I think they're very beautiful. So I've been wearing this eyeshadow palette for over a month. I filmed a lot of footage on a day-by-day basis. Over the course of the month, I had a lot of variety in my life. I had a number of special occasions, a wedding and a premiere for Bargain Block Season 3. If you guys don't already know, I am on episode 3 of Season 3 of HGTV's Bargain Block. But at any rate, there was a little premiere party for when the season started, and I went to that party. I wore this palette to that. I wore it to a wedding. I have worn this palette into work every single day for my brand new job for the last 2 weeks. So I think that alone should tell you that this palette for me has been incredibly wearable under many circumstances. I do think this is a great palette for me. I'm going to show you some of those looks now, and then afterwards I'll wrap up with just some more thoughts about what this is. I just walked the dog, so I have hot pink on, but today I'm probably gonna be wearing black. I have the Pat McGrath eyeshadow primer. I picked that up, and I've got a brush. It's not totally clean, but I've used it only for Delilah, so close enough. Picking up a little bit on a fluffy shader brush. And look at this, it's so pretty. What I like about Delilah is it does give you a little bit of that piecey glitter effect, but the base is that nice mauve. It's pretty, it just gives the most natural wash effect. A little bit of fair. It's really hard to see the difference even in person, but it does affect a beautiful blend. And I'm just gonna put a little bit of that on my lower lash line. So this is Monday's look, Delilah, Mesh, and Fair. Okay, it's Tuesday and I am wearing navy blue and white today, so I thought maybe I would go with a cooler, kind of more neutral look. I'm gonna start with travertine. Started with the inner corner. This is light enough on me that it can be used as an inner corner highlight, but it has enough of a taupey base that it's great all over the lid, and when you blend it out, it's a good one and done. I could put mascara on and be done, but I want a little more depth. So for that, I'm going to skim across the top and go into Stone. Here you can see the difference with just a little bit of Stone applied to blend out travertine in under the lashes. Just gives a little bit of depth. It's very subtle. This palette is subtle. Even when you try to make it bold and impactful, it's still pretty subtle. And this look, while it's pretty cool, it's not so cool. I feel like you can get cooler looks in both retro glam and glam. A little bit of fair. I really like this fair shade. I know it's not going to work on everybody, but on me, I think it's my favorite light colored shade I've seen her offer. It's a little pinker than my skin tone, but it's really close. It's really, really close. So one and done with travertine, supported with stone and fair. Okay, it's Tuesday. This is the look with I Need a Nude. I'm heading in. Okay, so it's Wednesday. It's even earlier than the last 2 days, and I have to be in soon. So how much time do I have to do my makeup right now? I have about 5 minutes more. I've done everything but my eyes. Okay, today's an all black day. I'm going to wear kind of an olivey black scarf. So we're just going to focus on the browns. Let's start with Ella. I'm going to blend Ella with Tender, so I'm going from here to here. Today is Wednesday, September 20th. We're 2 days before the autumnal equinox, so it's technically still summer, but we're down to the last days. I'm going to lean in a little bit into autumn. I'm going to use Fair to clean up around the edges, so just finish the blend. That looks nice. Okay, it's Thursday, and today we're going to do a little light and peachy. So I'm going to start with this shade right here, Wit, which I consistently think is called Wi-Fi. That's what I call it in my head. So I'm going to use Wi-Fi all over my lid just to create a vision of peachiness. This color is not nude on me. This color is apparently peachy, and I'll show you here. You'll be able to see it. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a colorful shade, but it does read as eyeshadow, and it reads as peachy pink on me. Do you see this? I can do it in a light manner that diffuses it, and if I do it all over, I feel like it can kind of marry with the blush. I have a little bit of a peachy blush on, trying to keep everything harmonious. But that's just Wit, or Wi-Fi. Or as they say in Europe, Wi-Fi. Kind of like Wi-Fi better than Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi's cuter. You'd think that the next obvious choice would be to deepen with this vague shade here, but I find that one is actually pretty purple in its own way. This is a little bit brighter. So what I'm going to do is stay in the light shades. I'm going to clean that up a little bit with Fair, which again, you know, day after day, it's a really good shade. What I'm trying to do today is get a look that is really different. I felt like yesterday, in the end, using Ella versus Delilah didn't really deliver a stunningly different result. It looked kind of the same. And today I want to do something that looks different. That's the hardest thing with this palette, I think, is getting variety in the look. I think what's kind of happening for me is that after using this palette a lot for a month, when I approach it, I'm kind of like, okay, now what? You know, what are we doing today? I'm going to go in with Sheen. If you remember, Sheen is a little bit less sparkly than Muse. It's a little more subtle, and I think that's good. I'm going into work, I've got a big day, a little bit of fallout. I know I got a comment specifically from Renee that you were experiencing quite a lot of fallout with this palette, and I think Sheen is the one that's giving me the most trouble. Was that the same one that gave you trouble? I can see that. I can totally see that. I kind of want to deepen it, but I don't want to deepen it too much. I'm going to do a little bit of Tender here. Just a little bit, just to give myself a little bit of something on the sides. Once I start adding Tender or any of the other kind of purpley mauve mattes, then we're kind of back in the same territory. It doesn't look that different anymore. It just kind of starts to look the same, maybe just a little bit peachier. I wonder sometimes if the 15 pan palette is the right choice for a targeted look. You know, it's like this one in particular has such a strong theme, a strong cohesive theme and vision. And I wonder if you need 15 pans to execute that. Because, you know, I do think we have some repetitive shades. I do feel like in the end, some of the looks that you get are also kind of repetitive. Could you do this in a 5 pan? We'll try it tomorrow. I'm going to use the mini Starlit palette tomorrow, which although it isn't called the mini I Need a Nude palette, I do think that it bears an obvious resemblance to this color story. And so I'm gonna try that one tomorrow. I have tried it before. It won't be my first time, but I'm going to try it as an actual kind of like add-on to this palette and see if I think you can get there in 5 little mini shades. Because if you can, and if you aren't sure about the peach and the mauve here, that mini might be the right answer. I just love those Natasha Denona minis. I've been meaning to make a video kind of for the longest where I actually talk through the minis. I have a lot, and I do think they're one of the best buys on the market for eyeshadow, especially if you like to have variety, you know, but you don't want to have more than you can use. Those minis are brilliant. That's it. That's the look for Thursday. A little bit of Wi-Fi, tender, and sheen. Okay, it's Friday today, and I'm actually gonna switch it up a little bit, and instead of using the I Need a Nude palette, I'm going to use the Natasha Denona Mini Starlit palette. And although the names don't align, the color stories really do. You've got the mauve matte, you've got some peachy tones, you have another kind of peachy mauve tone, and you have Galaxia, which is a super sparkly wet shade. This also appears in the Mini Retro palette. So it's a dupe, it's a shade. If you have the Mini Retro, you already have Galaxia, but it is a very, very beautiful shade. So I'm going to do a quick look with this just to see if my look ends up looking similar. I'm gonna go in with a big fluffy brush, and I'm going to start with the middle shade, which is Vega. Okay, so I'm putting this Vega shade all over my lid, which isn't always the best thing to do with Natasha Denona because her shades can become muddy if you just pile them on top of each other. I guess it's true for anyone, but it's true for hers. I think it's better sometimes to do a little bit more of a paint by numbers than a washy blend. That's what this is looking like, Vega on the lids. It's a pretty intense peach. It's a good shade though. I mean, it's just a whole lot like the I Need a Nude. I think this look is a little more peach on me, but it's the same vibe. It's the same vibe. So after a month of wearing this palette, I can say that for me, this is a good fit. I think this palette works well with my skin tone, with the way I want my makeup to look, and with the type of lifestyle that I have, which includes wearing makeup every day and liking a little bit of glam. I think this palette would be really nice for makeup artists who do a lot of bridal. I think this would be a beautiful palette for somebody's, you know, senior portrait, that type of thing. It provides a very lovely, soft, smoky eye with a gorgeous sparkle. I will say that after a month of using this, seriously, like every day for a month, I will say I am longing for some variety at this point. This palette, I don't think offers a huge variety. I think reliably, every day when I sit down to use this palette, I will finish my makeup with a beautiful eye look that will stay all day long. 12 hours later, when I come back home and I look in the mirror, my eye makeup still looks great. But what it doesn't offer is any kind of variety. And I'm at this point now, maybe it's the changing of the seasons. We're in Libra season now. I'm kind of excited to get into some new looks, some new options. However, I will say I think I Need a Nude will remain a staple in my collection. Sometimes when I'm getting ready in the morning, I wind up with no more than 10 to 15 minutes to do all of my makeup. And the I Need a Nude palette has been really a great tool in making a presentable look super quickly. I think that's valuable, at least I value it. I think what you're going to get is a palette that really does feel like it is worth $69 in terms of the quality of the formulas, the performance of the sparkles, the amount of reflect. They're gorgeous, you guys. They're gorgeous. I think they're worth that. You really have to ask yourself if you are looking for this much shadow that offers this little variety. I think you have to ask yourself, do you want to wear a soft smoky eye? That's what this palette's going to give you. Do you like mauves? Do you like peaches? Regarding the Mini Starlet, you know, the question is always, could you just buy the Mini Starlet palette and get close enough to the experience of the I Need a Nude palette to spend under $30 versus nearly $70? For me, I think the answer is no, and here's why. I think that this purple shade is, for the most part, a little too obviously purple compared to the shades in I Need a Nude. I think that it doesn't give you true neutrality. I think it gives you more obvious mauve. This shade is a peach metallic, and I feel, for me personally, that this is warmer and peachier and maybe a little less wearable than the neutral shimmers that are present here. I'm really happy to have the full palette with all of these brownie taupey neutrals. I think that this peachy shimmer shade is really outside of that category and in a different category altogether. On me, these mattes are pretty, but on me, I feel like they're colorful. I don't feel like they're nude. I actually find this little mini palette to be quite colorful and more colorful than the I Need a Nude. I think if this peachy metallic had instead been a taupey metallic, I think then maybe you might have gotten a little bit closer to replicating the experience. But as it is, I honestly don't think so. Tell me, did you pick up this palette? I know this one was an absolute banger. Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. It helps my channel so much. And if you want to hang out with me again, I post videos on Sunday. Please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you as part of this extremely supportive community. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well out there, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Thank you so much for watching. Talk soon.